Press record.
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm just going to give a short talk on an excavation or a group of excavations I did in the Tottenham Hill area over the past few years. The site location, you can see it plainly there in the red, and you can see the proximity, as Harvey's just mentioned, close to the river. That's the River Lee in there and the reservoirs. And the site, the project itself was a redevelopment project, and it was the redevelop Tottenham Hill. Now, it made up of 5 sites. We're going to touch mainly on the Wellborn site here and these 2 sites, North Island and Ferry Island. We also evaluated these 2 sites, but we came down onto the Enfield silts, but we didn't see any features or any flints in these areas. And here we have a map showing the area of Tottenham that is due for redevelopment. It was mainly like a warehouse area, railway sidings, and eventually they decided, let's change it, build some residential houses. And this is the site, again, this area here, you can see it. This is unfortunately like an artist's representation, but this block here is the Wellborn block, and that's already been built. Here we have the North Island, that's already built, and the Ferry Island, and that's under construction as we speak. And these are the other 2 sites, the Ashley Road West and East. Right, and here's some historic maps of the area. And again, in this area, this is the first one, the 1619 clay map. Unfortunately, I've had to set it upside down because it was drawn from more or less where south at the top of the screen. So one thing of interest, we've got Wellborn in here, and they've got some sort of stream running down in there. And then in this area, we have North Island and Ferry Island. And again, the same sort of area in along here and in along there. And then eventually, when the railways came, the area started to get redeveloped and stuff. And Wellborn is now under rows of terrace houses, which you'd think have impacted the archaeology, but whenever I came to machine it, they had very, very little impact on the works, on our findings. Also the same for parts of Ferry Island and North Island, although part of North Island was completely truncated away due to a pub's cellar. And this shows the landscape zones from mapping landscapes in the lower Lee Valley, and it sort of illustrates where we are in the zones. The Wellborn site would be roughly along this curve here, more or less at the base of the 3.2 zone, which is at the base of a sloping valley side. And the one in the center is the main channel of the Lee, and then the floodplain running in along here. And I asked our CAD to sort of like see how it looked on LiDAR, and this one shows it very, very well, where we're just in the valley, almost the valley floor, coming into the floodplain, and you can see the valley, the western valley edge here, and then Walthamstow side over here. And what you can also notice is the close proximity. There's almost like a pinch point in this area between the sides of the valley. And now we come to the Wellborn site. And Wellborn, we started like all of the sites. We ran an evaluation, a 3-trench evaluation. And on the left frame, you can see the 3 evaluation trenches. And you can see the site, as I said to Jane earlier, the site's not the most photogenic of sites, but what we found on it was fantastic. Now, this may be a prehistoric society lecture, and you might be wondering why I put a medieval ditch in. This is what we found in the evaluation. We also found it during the main excavation. But this ditch produced a very small assemblage of prehistoric burnt flint and a blade fragment. And that's one of the reasons why we went to further works on this site. And I'm going to start with the main excavation. I don't know if you can actually see this well. One of the other things about on site was it was either very, very rainy, as you'll see in the photographs, or it could be very, very sunny. So I do apologize for the shadow on the shot. But in this picture, you can just about see little white markers across the site, some here, some here. Now, when I was machining the site, I started seeing flints everywhere. And I thought, I've got to actually start marking these somehow. So I got the garden center across the road. I got a load of little plant labels and marked it out like that. So whenever I spoke to my bosses, it was literally, I say, listen, we've got a lot of flints here. And I could show them where they were. And as you can see, I was mentioning about the weather and the during the works. This is one of our not quite so rainy days, but the site did not look good. Next. One thing I did highlight with the markers was that we knew we had a big concentration of flints on site. And one of the things with consultation with glass was we had to find a methodology to get the most information from the site. And it was agreed that we'd establish 5-meter grid across the site and then separate it down into 1-meter grid squares. But for the sample before the main excavations, we targeted the southwest corner of each grid square, like these ones here, there, and so on. It was just, as we took it down in spits, we could actually see which squares had the greatest concentrations of flints. And also, we would record each flint using GPS, so we could actually have an idea. We could actually take the survey back, process it, and then we could have a better idea on what we're up to. And we also trialed 3D recording of 6 squares within this area. Now on the left, you can see someone cleaning the top, more or less the top layer, the top spit prior to excavation. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like she's got many flints in that, but on the right hand, you can see where we've gone down, possibly taking out part of the first spit, and you can actually see little burnt flints starting to show up. Now, during the works as well, we got a few natural features underneath the brick earth. So we had to, in certain squares, we took everything down stratigraphically. On the left, you can still see some burnt flints. And then on the right, this square is finished, where we've taken it out stratigraphically, and we've come down to a layer that's, we're sure that there's no more flints in it. And then the spit on the left has mainly struck flints, which you can see. And what we've done is we've left them upstanding so we could record them better. And then on the spit on the right, you can see there's a lot of burnt flints, which eventually led us to believe it's going to be, we can sort of pinpoint areas where there may have been hearth activity. And again, back to the slide on the left, this was partly for when we were doing the 5D recording. We would leave them upstanding so we could actually try and suss out, record the bulbar end position, the ventral dorsal side, and sort of calculate roughly the dip slope angle. On the slide on the right, this one shows this object here is the remnants of a broken axe that was either broken to and they just dropped it. And to help with the survey, again, back to the garden center, I wanted more plant markers. So as we cleaned off a layer, we could pinpoint where the flints were and work our way down around them. And then also, whenever we came to record and survey each flint, it was given a small find number. The marker was surveyed, and then the marker was taken away. It was sort of like a fail safe, so we don't mess up. And then, as I said before, we trialed 5D recording, and this was done on 6 squares across the site. And we were going to target the the squares with the most concentrations of flints. And we would try, as I said, we would try to see the bulbar end and the dip of slope. And we would calculate, the survey would give us the XY coordinates, but again, we would also try and calculate the dip angle and the dip slope. These were all recorded at a scale of 1 to 5. But because it was in brick earth, we spoke to glass and we had to abandon it because it wasn't giving us the data that we needed. Because the ground would either be too wet or the flints were in the ground and the position in the ground was more to do with bioturbation. That's what brought them down. And in this area, gives you an idea, we did 2 of the 5D squares in this concentration, 2 in here and 2 in here. These areas were where we found the highest concentrations of flints. And even though we did abandon the 5D, we kept going. And as you can see in the picture, it was quite trying, quite difficult some days. But each square that we did, each spit, we sampled all the spoil to take away for environmental processing and wet sieving for microliths and debitage. And here you can see some of the on-site processing. You can see the center picture, collecting the samples, and then wet sieving, the only way I call it is mud at the time. And as well, it was more like torture for some of these poor guys because this was winter and it wasn't, we had to swap it around, so we did, because people were getting down. What we couldn't process them all on site, but we had to, our offices in Brockley and Cambridge went on to finish off the more detailed stuff, like for plant analysis and things. This on site is mainly for microlith retrieval. And then with the mud, there's loads of rain, and then the site was just constantly dirty. And you can see a guy cleaning out the hut quite happily, well, not really, and then cleaning out the processing cabin, which had to be done on a daily basis. The hut was maybe 2-3 times a day on a bad day. Now, with the GPS and how we were recording, we managed to find 3 distinct flint scatters. This is flint scatter A, flint scatter B, and flint scatter C. Now, if you have a look, you can see the concentrations of red flints. They're red markers. That's the burnt flints, probably where hearths have been. And then the blue flints are the work flints. And then I've got a photo of flint scatter A. This is in this area that you see here. And again, water did play quite a bit on the site. Although these tracks did give us reasonable access to the actual working squares without actually disturbing any of the archaeology, because these were modern intrusions. We come down to flint scatter B, which is probably the biggest scatter that we had, and that's literally in this area here. Now on the map, it may have extended further to the south, but we weren't able to excavate in that area because we had a standoff from live electric services, high-powered cables, and there was a substation in around that area as well. And flint scatter C, which is in this area, and just about where this young lady's working. Unfortunately, I don't have any really decent photographs of the area to show on that one. And again, we're back to site conditions, looking grim. But despite the conditions, the results that we got spoke for themselves. It was worth all the time and effort we put into it. And in this, which one's that? Worked. Sorry, guys, I can't see. It was definitely worth it because you can see the scatters. And then also with further analysis, post-excavation work, we're able to do a bit more spatial analysis of each scatter to decide what sort of tools and what activity was happening in the area. On this diagram, you can see the blue circles represent where we lifted lithic cores, and then the reds are core dressings in the main concentration areas, but also sporadically across the site. And this one, pardon me, is the tool distribution. It's rather hard for me to say, but we did find axes on site, and these seem to be, I think it was 2 or 3, and these were concentrated in this area here. Our burins are marked in yellow scrapers, one outlying there. And as you say, the red, we also had picks in this area, and then microlith pink scrapers as well. Now, 101 flints were sent off for lithic microwear analysis, which examined the wear and fractures that formed along the edges of the flint due to the usage. And this highlighted certain tool usages. And on here, the reconstruction shows dry hide scraping. And on this edge here is the scraping edge of the scraper. Same with the blurry one, unfortunately. Sorry about that. But you've also got it there. And then also more scrapers. The little dotted lines are indicating where you would have scraped the hide. Although this flint in this area was quite interesting, because on this edge, the microwear analysis indicated that it had been hafted and set in the shaft along that edge. And then we had quite a few butchery tools. And on these, you can see the nice sharp edges, both sides, sharp edge on that side. And again, these two, I shouldn't have left them, but you can see the butchery edge along here, and along this, and along here, and here. And more butchery tools. And then we have meat cutting tools, where you can see this nice dark black flint with an edge along here and a little bit here, and this broken tool that neatly fit back together along here. And we have more meat cutting tools, as you can see, with the dotted lines on each side. On this one, you can see the cutting edges quite clearly. And more meat cutting tools that you can see. Now, one of the things that I did find that alerted me to that the site might be quite important was this tranché axe. While I was machining the site, I could see lithics popping up here and there, but then I saw this one. And this one, I'd never seen one come out of the ground before, especially not brick earth. And so whenever I rung my boss, my line manager, I told them, they told me, best get in touch with Barry Bishop. And then when we got in touch with Barry Bishop, Barry came down, had a look at the site, and then sort of realized we've got something quite important here. And along with the axe, we have other tools, like a softwood cutting tool. And here's a rejuvenation flag. You can see with the former edges along there. And then this fragment may be the tang of a projectile or a back knife. And then this one's quite interesting because in the top end, you've got whittling or wood or antler. And then at the bottom, from this line down, we've got evidence of butchery. And then this one, I think it's 2 burins, are graving tools. This one for hard, maybe bone material, and this one for antler. And coming back, the flint is not local, so it's not, and was probably obtained from secondary deposits close to chalk outcrops, perhaps clay with flint deposits. Chalk and superficial deposits with flints lie a few kilometers further upstream in the Middle Lee Valley. However, analysis showed the raw material is comparable to that used at Three Ways Wharf. situated on the River Cole. So a wider Middle Thames origin of a flint is feasible. And we do need to do some more work on the provenance of the flint of the site. And because of the analysis, we were able to ascertain that our assemblage was of the deep car typology. This one's here. An early Mesolithic cultural group prevalent in the 9th, possibly 8th millennium, these are characterized by obliquely truncated points with long, slender isosceles triangles and trapezoids. Now, one thing that's recent to me in the last couple of months, we got some C14 dates back from 2 hazelnut shells, and these were retrieved from the environmental sampling of scatters B and C. And as you can see, it gives us a very early date. And the microliths of scatters A and B included typical slender forms of obliquely truncated points, but also trapezoid and isosceles triangles. These latter pieces stand out as somewhat different to typical deep car microliths. And triangles can be a minor component of deep car sites, but are usually of the larger scaline forms. There are good reasons to assume the microliths are contemporary based on their proportion, size, and presence of additional retouch on their tips. It is speculated that these demonstrate a nuanced lithic technology for an early stage of the deep car grouping. And scatter C had a single diagnostic microlith and has similar blade reduction technology and tool types to other scatters, and so is probably also deep car. And here we've got probability distribution chart of the deep car type microliths, and up at the top we have the Tottenham Hale site and the Tottenham Hale dates. Now, one of the other sites that I mentioned, the excavation at Ferry Island, this didn't produce a lot of prehistoric evidence of prehistoric activity. It did produce a couple of linear features here and here, and also a surface, well, not surface, more like a disturbed brick earth in this area here. Now, one thing that was notable about this site as well was this feature here, which appeared to be like a silted up stream or marshy area. And one of the things we did notice whenever we found the flints on this site was they were appearing on this area, predominantly in this area here. Now, we did get some background like pottery from later prehistoric, but we did get some residual Mesolithic flints. And here we have the area that I was mentioning, the triangular area. You've got sort of dried up, channeled here, and then we've got the flint. The other sites, again, you can see it's very photogenic, is North Island. Now, this was a little site sort of sandwiched between Ferry Island and Wellborn. Again, the natural was on this site. On this site, you had brick earth along here, which was sealed by alluvial deposits, sealing the rest of the site. And we did get a couple of prehistoric features on this. This tree throw here contained flint core, and these were dated Mesolithic, Neolithic flints. And there was a couple of little post holes here that produced burnt flint and a possible scraper. Now, as part of our remit, we managed to do 2 open days for the local schools and the general public. Now, the Wellborn site, we had the schools up till about lunchtime, and these were very, very well attended by local schools. And also in the afternoon, we had a lot of visitors. As you can see, we're showing some finds to some members of the public. And as usual, work continued, but you can see the number of people that came. It was one of our best attended open days we've run. And then on the other side, on the Ferry Island site, again, we had our stalls set up. It's a beautiful, beautiful sunny day, but we didn't get quite as many people as the previous visit, but it was still a success. It was a lovely day, nice people, nice engagement with the public, and of course, the local schools prior to lunchtime. All right. The Wellborn site is situated on the left bank of the River Lee, and as you can see, back to the LiDAR map, and you can see it there. It's some 10 meters above the confluence of the River Thames. The local reach of the Lee at this location is narrow, as I mentioned earlier, especially when compared to the areas upstream and downstream, areas up towards beyond Tottenham marshes, and then as you go down to Walthamstow and Hackney marshes. The topographic position of the site at the base of the valley side and on the margin of floodplain would have presented a great potential. Surprisingly, there is little Mesolithic activity recorded hereabouts, although fine spots of Mesolithic axes in Hackney and Walthamstow may help wider use of the lower Lee landscape. The scatter size suggests that the site may have been a persistent place with successive visits and or the result from the separate activity zones of a larger occupation, possibly a short-lived base camp, much as envisaged for deep car type occupations with their higher degree of residential mobility. The rivers Lee and Colne are the two principal northern tributaries of the Thames in the Greater London area, and both rivers are rich in early Mesolithic records. The rivers bisect the London clay, forming a block of land some 30 to 40 kilometres wide, and there's speculation that early Mesolithic hunter-gatherers may have exploited a terrain, including both valleys and the higher ground between. Wellborn is comparable to deep karst sites in the Colne Valley. Scatter Sea West, Three Ways Wharf, Uxbridge, and the Sanderson site, Uxbridge. And to the north of Wellborn, the site of Broxbourne 102, for a little bit further upstream in Hertfordshire. The site of Westheath Hampstead is situated on the higher ground between the two rivers and may be equivalent to upland summer hunting stations seen in northern Britain, while the B&Q site in Southwark may represent a riparian exploitation site at a lakeside closer to the Thames floodplain. However, there's a danger of pigeonholing these early Mesolithic sites of Greater London and its environs into a single block time unit when they may occupy a period of several centuries. Detailed typo-technological analysis of single occupation sites has great potential for revealing nuances of technological change within these archaeological constructs. This may well have been the case, may well be the case with the Wellborn site. And I'm going to finish with my favourite find of, I think, 25 years in London, and an artist's representation of life in the Mesolithic. I thank you very much, guys.
You, Shane, that was superb. Absolutely brilliant. I must admit, I am getting very, very excited over that axe.
It's lovely. It came home with me every day.
Ah.
It was the one thing, the cameras, everything else could stay on site, bar that. That was something precious.
Please tell me you slept with it under your pillow. It's absolutely lovely one.
It's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
It's an absolutely fantastic site. It's been a real joy to hear about this. I have a great fondness for the Mesolithic, which I found is greatly overlooked in London. It does exist. You've mentioned a number of the sites, and actually the Lee has got a lot of little sites with Mesolithic traces in very unprepossessing places, and yet there's really good, strong evidence. And I think your point about not pigeonholing these sites and trying to unpick timelines and the chronology is really important, because we've got several thousand years worth of these sites, and it would be wonderful to understand how they fit in a bit more. But I mean, you know, all credit to you and your team for working in, quite frankly, disgusting conditions to get such good results out of this. I will stop babbling because I'm very excited, and I will ask Harvey to say anything he'd like to say, and also ask the audience if they would like to put any questions into the Q&A or the chat boxes, and I'll keep a look on those.
Thank you, Chair.
Do we have questions from the audience? We have nothing in the Q&A box at the moment. We have a lovely...
Sorry, yes, I'm with you now. Jane, would you like me to say a few words to Shane before we start off with the questions coming in?
I've got a question actually from Janet down in sunny Sidcup. Shane, Janet notes that your interpretation images are absolutely beautiful, and asks whether PCA has its own illustration team, or do you commission them?
No, we don't. Well, actually, I think for certain sites we do commission some, but these are ones that I've sort of got off the internet, to be completely honest.
There are not many good interpretation images of the Mesolithic, because it's very difficult to fill in the gaps of things that are missing when you've only got the flints. So it was nice to see things like the representations of the benders and the representation of the various activities that can be deduced from the microware. But it must be said that PCA do have a fabulous graphics team, and not to pimp their other books, like the recently out Bermondsey Abbey book. There are some absolutely beautiful images, and in fact, a few of us might have borrowed one of the images from the Tabar Square Roman temple for our recent interpretation boards in Greenwich Park, which we will do a walk by later this year. Right, more questions. Lots of questions. Right. We'll start with Sylvia. Can more radiocarbon dates be obtained, do you think, please, for other squares or spits?
Sylvia, I'm not sure on that one, because I'm not writing this up, and it's Lyndon's in charge of the more or less the flints and the lithic side of like Wellborn and the other sites, and he's working on a publication at the minute, so I'm not sure if it's in the budget. He did mention that he did have a limited budget for it, but it'd be nice if somebody came from somewhere for further analysis.
Well, I suppose it's worth noting at this point that the Prehistoric Society occasionally make grants available, although for a developer-funded site, they may look a bit askance at that. And of course, I think next year, LAMAS will be making its research grant available again. We're spending it this year on the new website, coming soon, but we will be relaunching that shortly. So always worth thinking about that.
Yeah, it definitely is.
Now, a slightly longer question, possibly. Question from Anne. Please, can I ask what's a lithic core, a core dressing, a rejuvenation flake, and a tranche axe? And I think we could answer and say the big thing on the screen is the tranche axe. Although it might be worth saying why it's a tranche axe and not hand axe.
Well, a tranche axe, you would put it maybe in a half. Hand axe is literally much earlier, and it's one you hold in your hand, really, is the best way to describe it. It's, the rejuvenation flake, there was one on the screen, and it's basically where they take the sharp, it's basically flaking off this end, so they can get it sharp again whenever it gets a bit blunt. Now, the core will be a piece of flint that'll be prepared for working, and you'll see like edges of it where they've napped flint. And then also the dressings will look like, best description would almost be like little bladelets that have been partially worked but not finished. Hopefully that helps. I don't know if I don't have any pictures on hand of them. Sorry.
That's okay. No, that's really helpful. It is for people that have not worked on flint scatters or sat there trying to stick them all back together again. It is a tricky thing, and the terminology can get very, very arcane at times. But effectively, Anne, what Shane and his colleagues are able to do is the identification of all the bits very precisely located in 3D, if not in 5D, allows you, if you're very lucky in some cases, to work out where the bottom of the Mesolithic person sat because of the types of things scattered around where they would be working. And that's certainly one of the most fantastic things that came out of the Three Ways Wharf analysis at the site that Shane mentioned, where you could see gaps and spreads, gaps and spreads, gaps and spreads of flint around fireplaces. Possibly getting slightly carried away where the author was suggesting that the elders of the group may have sat at this end around the fireplace because that's against the prevailing wind, so they wouldn't have got smoke in their eyes. But it's great fun to actually be able to see on these sites where people were actually sitting and working flints and spraying debitage and making the tools so many thousands of years ago. Right. Okay. So to carry on, actually, Lucy's asked a very relevant question on the point of flints. Can you confirm that the tools, presumably the tools, Lucy, are being manufactured at this site, and they're not just here from use in, for instance, butchering?
Oh, at the moment, I can't confirm that, but from what Lyndon was saying, it's like they have been worked at the floor, and the reason we don't have any like evidence of like, well, I would call them chipping floors, and we probably do, but is the fact that a lot of the flints have from plant action have filtered down through the, what is it you call it, down through the brick earth over time. Now, the publication will be coming. I'm not sure when it's due out, but further analysis on that will be cleared up on the publication.
Brilliant, thank you. Another question from Penny. Great question this. What questions did the school children ask, and were they aware Tottenham had such a long history?
They didn't. And a lot of them were amazed as well. And it's like, luckily, we have Becky Haslam, who now works for AOC. She was on hand to work with the children, and she was absolutely fantastic. And she really, really got through to them. And they asked her all sorts of things, what they would have eaten, where they put the rubbish, just lots of random things. But she did also give them an idea of a sort of timeline in a sort of way that got through to the kids. But most of them loved it. Really, really liked it.
That's fantastic. Now, Janet, who asked about the interpretation images, has indicated that, and I've forgotten this actually, there is a cracking Mesolithic site in Priory Gardens, Orpington, that ODAS have written up, but there is only a single interpretation image. So it may be that Janet will get in touch with you later about where some of these images are from. And I think, as you say, some are Thames Valley Deep Car. There are some very good images from up north, because it must have been about a decade ago, where Clive Waddington, somewhere in Northumbria, I think identified the first proper evidence for a Mesolithic hut in England. And I think they even built one actually, but I think there's some good images from those projects. And to come back to Anne, so yeah, a tranche axe, it's not held in the hand, it is halved. Sometimes it's not fixed in a piece of wood, but sometimes it'll be kind of cross-tied to it. And of course you get tranche adzes as well, which are held in a different plane. And the thing that was used hollowing out the log boat on one of the images would have been a tranche adze. I think that's all the questions that we have currently. Any more for any more? If not, I will stop the recording and hand back to Harvey to, oh, sorry, Anne. where's the flint from? Shane, I think you touched on that.
Yeah, there has to be more work done on that. We know it's not local, so it's not going to be that far away. But again, that's one of the things that's going to be hopefully ironed out when we do the publication.
Super. Thanks very much. Thanks for answering all of those. I think we have no more questions. We do have a number of thanks for very interesting talk. Thanks for very interesting analysis. And I certainly support that because I thoroughly enjoyed it. And Harvey, if you would like to conclude, that would be wonderful.
Yeah,